Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we've got part 83 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people be making and compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. So today we've got quite an interesting assortment. Got a couple animals that have got remasters, a couple new species, one very dubious one that we'll get into the history of, and a cool little marine guy that I'm quite excited to get stuck into. So we're going to be starting off with the cosmetics. So this one was done by Wheat. We've got Edmontosaurus, or Eonectens as we'll go by, and I'll explain a little bit what's changed to make him more accurate, not only to the Jurassic World art from the website, but also more accurate to the actual species. Here we have got Eonectens. So let's have a little look at this guy. Well, which one's the nicest? I like this one. We'll let him have a little bit of a walk to get him in a nice posse. So this is, there we are. Let's have a look at you. I like how we got your body going. So there are two different species of Edmontosaurus. I've probably mentioned this a couple dozen times. We've got Edmontosaurus regalis, which is the one a little bit earlier from like the Campanian. That's the one that lived like the Spletosaurus and Gorgosaurus and things like that. Albertosaurus as well. It has we have pretty extensive soft tissue from both species, and Eonectens seem to have a large comb. With Eonectens not having that comb. With Eonectens being the latest species, it's slightly larger, lived with Tyrannosaurus. I believe the largest estimates or largest specimens have potentially put it up to 15 meters or so. So bigger than T-Rex, you know, very big animal. So there's two different species separated through time, and there's a little bit different changes to them. And the original one that Julius Titoni did, who's quite a well-accomplished paleo artist for the website, it was commissioned to them for the website, he originally just made it Eonectens. And based on Eonectens, but when Jurassic World Evolution 2 team and Frontier, they're like, okay, we got to make a Edmontosaurus for us. They basically meshed Eonectens and Regalis together, putting the comb on it, have the face of Eonectens and things like that. They mash it together and just call it a day and call it a Edmontosaurus because it's a mixture of both species. But this is just a change to make it a little bit more accurate to the art, but also to the animal itself. As we can see, it doesn't have that huge comb on its head that we know Regalis had, a little like fleshy comb, almost like a wattle or something. We also know that, you know, they've got that little bit more horse-like face that Eonectens has, you know, a little bit more bigger and broader. Also, it's a little bit bigger as well. As I mentioned, Eonectens did get quite big. You know, living with T-Rex, you got to defend yourself somehow, and it seems like some got pretty big from some specimens. Potentially 12 to 15 meters, so quite huge animals. Up there with like Shatungosaurus, which was actually their closest relative or sister taxon. But yeah, it's also made a bit bigger as well. So yeah, this is kind of a not a huge mod, but still cool to see that. Though I think the feet still need a bit of a change, as we know they would have had hooves. But other than that, it's pretty spot on. Pretty much spot on to the art and spot on for the species there. So quite cool. So we've got a nice Eonectens. It's also made a little bit bigger too, so it can defend itself and do things like that. So yeah, we'll let it run off and do its thing. Just don't get anywhere near the front of these guys. So we've got another really cool species here. So this is Amazonosaurus. This was done by, well, the Eonectens was done by Wheat and friends and things like that. Amazonosaurus was done by Netraptor and Trippy28. So they've both done a really good job with this one. So let's have a look. Here's a really cool, nice mods. I'll let them run off a little bit. Let's see if we can get them a little bit nicer position so I can talk about them. Oh yeah, there we are. There you are. Perfect. So this is Amazonosaurus. So this means Amazon lizard. So these guys are a diplodocid. I can't even speak today. I've had a couple like moments, but they're a diplodocid sauropod dinosaur from the early Cretaceous of what is now South America. It would have been large-bodied quadruped with a long neck and a whip-like tail, typical of other diplodocids. Although it's more derived diplodocids were some of the longest animals to ever exist, so things, like Barosaurus, Diplodocus, Barosaurus, those kind of guys, Apatosaurus, those kind of animals. These guys were not very huge in comparison, so they got about no more than 12 meters or 40 feet long, and estimated to be about 5 or so tons, about the size of an elephant. So the fossils of these guys are known from some back and tail vertebrae, ribs, and fragments of the pelvis, and is the only dinosaur remains identifiable for the generic level from the Ishikura Formation in Mahanaro. And this geologic formation dates back down to the Aptian to Albian stages of the early Cretaceous, so about 125 to 100 million years ago. So right at the beginning of the Cretaceous, just after the extinctions of the Jurassic, or whatever happened in Jurassic. And it was first recorded in sediments that were interpreted by geologists to be floodplain deposits at a river delta. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted to do. So its tall neural spines of the tail identified as a diplodocid, but fragmentary nature means it's quite difficult to place on the family tree. They've kind of placed it within the superfamily Diplodocidae. However, some of the features suggest it actually may be a late surviving member of a line of quite basal diplodocids. So, yeah, things a little bit more basal on the line. Some suggest it's like related to Rebeccasaurids, or more derived than Rebeccasaurids, but still basal to Dicraeosaurids and Diplodocids. So it's quite basal, but it may be a little bit more derived than a few other species. And, it's very interesting. South America was kind of like a little place for these Diplodocids to hold on and survive, though we do have Nigersaurus from Africa. So, despite the fact that other dinosaurs have been named from Brazil, this is actually the first named genus from the Amazon basin. And its generic name is derived from the Brazilian legal Amazon region and the Greek saurus, so kind of the saurus, the Amazon lizard, the lizard from the Amazon basin. There is one named species, Maharensis, which is based on the Brazilian state of Maranhão, and both genus and species were named in 2003 by Brazilian paleontologists Ismar de Souza Calavillo and Leonardo dos Santos Avila, and their Argentine colleague Leonardo Salgado. And in terms of biogeography, these basal diplodocids have been found in several parts of South America, as well as Northern Africa, during the early Cretaceous, as Titanosaurian sauropods and Carcharodontosaurid and Spinosaurid theropods. Though by the late Cretaceous period, these would have gone extinct, while Angola titan remained and Titanosaurs kind of proliferated. The predatory theropod families of the early Cretaceous were later replaced by Abelisaurids and Megaraptorans during the late Cretaceous. So it's really interesting to show like a good faunal turnover during that Cretaceous in those southern continents like Africa and South America. So yeah, still learn a lot about these guys. Very, very cool. I love the patterns that it's got. Really, really nice. I like the patterns on the tail too. Nice variety. How can you not love that? Definitely a big fan. Netraptor always knocks out of the park. And we've got the correct feet too. How can you not love that? Alright, we'll let them run off and do their thing. So next one here is done by Chocolate. We have got a remake of one of their mods. We've got Brachytrachelopan. So quite excited to get stuck into this one again. Of course, the Edmontosaurus wants to come in and, take all the fun, and no, we've done that. So let's have a look at you, since you're the one that's kind of the nicest position, and it's doing it again. There we are. So this is Brachytrachelopan, a very, very interesting dinosaur. So Brachytrachelopan is a short-necked sauropod, just like Amazonosaurus. from the late Jurassic or Oxfordian to Tithorian, so about the same time, the Morrison kind of time, from Argentina. And the holotype and only known specimen was collected from an eroded soil and flugel sandstone from the Canton Calamelo Formation, in a hill approximately 25 kilometers northeast of Cerro Condor, Chubut province in west central Argentina in South America. Although its remains are very incomplete, the skeletal, they have 8 cervical vertebrae, 12 dorsal vertebrae, and 3 sacral vertebrae, as well as ribs, the distal end of the femur, left tibia, and right ischium, which is quite interesting. And much of the specimen was probably lost to erosion many years before its discovery. And the type specimen, or the type species, is Brachytracheopan mesai. The specific name honors Daniel Messer, who was a local shepherd that discovered the specimen while searching for his lost sheep. And the genus name translates to short-necked Pan, with Pan being the god of shepherds. And the reason it's got its name is because Brachytracheopan has the very short neck, probably the shortest neck of any sauropod dinosaur, which is a group that's typically famous for their quite long necks. So it's actually 40% shorter than other Dicraeosaurids, and the shortest of any known sauropods. And there's evidence that this lineage actually specifically specialized to take a frill, a niche that was not exploited or used by other members of the sauropods. Then they're quite small as well, so Brachytracheopan was about 10 or 11 meters long, or about 5 tons in body mass. And they also noted there was a high degree of fusion presence between the neural arches and the reciprocentra, which does suggest that it was not a juvenile animal, so this animal was likely an adult when it died. However, its body size was not because it was a baby or a juvenile. This is an adult, it was just a small animal with a short neck. So they diagnosed the species of Brachytracheopan as differing from a few other aspects, but in terms of its classification, it belongs to the group of sauropods, and the group it was a diplodocid as well, so related to Amazonosaurus and a few other animals, but specifically its family, it is Dicraeosaurid. So it's related to things like Dicraeosaurus, Amargasaurus, Baharajasaurus, and animals like that. So these were animals that kind of lived in the late Jurassic in North America and South America, but also in other places like that. So we have Silurisia that came from the Morrison. We also have Brachytracheopan and Dicraeosaurus that came from South America and Africa, respectively. So they were like a group of diplodocids that had relatively short necks, and this one was just kind of the most extreme example of that. In terms of its paleoecology, though, it suggests these short necks would have actually run counter to the predicted feeding hypotheses for most sauropods. So these guys would have been more adapted for low browsing and specific needs, which has been suggested in Amargasaurus and Dicraeosaurus. Moreover, the morphology of Brachytracheopan actually suggested that it significantly resisted dorsal flexion of the neck. That seems these guys were quite specialized at eating plants at about 1 to 2 meters off the ground. And the diet may have been a limiting factor in body size, and they may have had the same sort of ecological niches as ornithopods and things like that, like iguanodonts and hadrosaurs eventually, and ceratopsians and ankylosaurs, which had that kind of low browsing niche. And a lot of them were absent from the Gondwanian sediments at the time, so a lot of them were not present in South America during the early Cretaceous and Jurassic. So they would have taken that niche as being that kind of mid-low level browser. And while they would have been abundant of similar ecosystems, such as North America, where they would have been absent at the time. And this actually may indicate that the large iguanodontians and Dicraeosaurids were analogues, and a great example of convergent evolution, since they were kind of evolving to take the same sort of niche, that large mid-level browser. But yeah, really, really cool, and it's nice to see that Chocolate's come back and done it again, giving us a really, really nice one. I like the colours of these two, a little bit more basic, but this one looks quite nice too, with that little bit of highlight. He's really done a great job. It hasn't got the right feet at the front, but the back look fine, so that's my, only nitpick really, but rest of it looks perfect. I love it. Definitely a good fan, and love the colours too. Definitely did a wonderful job. Alright, so next up, we're going to let them run out of the way because they're being annoying, running in front of everyone. So next up, we've got a really cute little guy. We've got Pneumaraptor, and I know you're going to walk through there, so we are going to wait until you've moved out. Alright, so we've got Pneumaraptor done by Netraptor and Trippy28. Here we are. Look at that's a cutie. I quite like him. Look at that little cutie. So this is Pneumaraptor, which is a genus of small para-avian dinosaur from Hungary, and is known from a single complete left shoulder girdle or scapular coracoid that was found in the Shibiana Formation in the Iroquois locality in the Balcony Mountains of western Hungary, and is believed to come from the late Cretaceous, about the Santonian age, about 85 million years ago. The type species is Pneumaraptor fordi, named by Geza Fodor, who provided funding for the dig, and the genus name Pneumaraptor means air thief, which refers to the pneumaticity of its bones, or kind of the hollowness of its bones. The hollow spaces where the air sacs inside would have been to potentially help breathe, but also keep the skeleton light. A lot of sauropods and theropods and birds today have these air sacs that use them to breathe, but also makes them lighter too. The holotype itself is identified as catalog number MTMV2008.38.1 and houses the Hungary Museum, Natural History Museum in Budapest. So, Pneumaraptor differs from other theropods by having a narrow shoulder blade that is nearly circular in cross section, as well as having a large opening in the bone to house a hollow airspace cavity. So this bone is small, indicated the animal was at least 3 times smaller than Velociraptor. So for comparison, most estimates of Velociraptor put it at about 15 kilos, about the size of a big turkey. So potentially about 5 kilos is a maximum, as big as it'll get. So not huge, about the size probably of a chicken or something like that. Even that, it's probably a bit of an overestimate. The shoulder girdle was L-shaped, so it's not taking any losses, showing that it's a member of the group Paraaves, which includes dromaeosaurids, troodontids, and birds. And while the Pneumaraptor remains too incomplete to tell which, if any, its groups belong to, many of its features are similar to dromaeosaurids, which may suggest that it would be too. Though there are other para-avian remains that may belong to Pneumaraptor. These include isolated teeth, claws, tail vertebrae, and a partial leg bone. So the story of Pneumaraptor may not be over yet. They may find some more bits and pieces that we can add together to get a better look at what this animal was really like. But this is a pretty good idea at the moment. It seems like it was some sort of dromaeosaur or para-aves. But yeah, quite cool. Definitely a big fan. Netraptor always knocks out of the park with these, and you can see all these different colors. So you see the blue one. This is like a green one. Let's see what other ones we got. Let's see if we can find a red one. Oh, that's a nice red one. I like that. That looks really, really nice. But anyway, we're going to let these guys run off and do their thing. So next up, we're going to the lagoon. So I'm going to have to release these because they get stuck in the animation because they are so small. But this is Barracudasauroides. That's how I'm going to say it. Barracudasauroides. So let's... Alright, so we're back. This is Barracudasauroides. So we can see there's a couple of different patterns there. I kind of like this lighter one better. That one this looks pretty gross, to be honest. But it's just, yeah, too bright and beyond. But anyway, there's a nice pattern here. This is the beauty of Jurassic World Evolution 2. You get all sorts of different patterns. So this is Barracudasauroides. So Barracudasauroides is a genus of Mixosaurid ichthyosaur from the Middle Triassic. So I'll explain a little bit more about what Mixosaurid is. So Mixosaurid day is kind of a group of really early ichthyosaurs from the Jurassic, and they've been found all across the world. There were originally kind of 6 different species of Mixosaurus described, but they have been split into different species, such as kind of Conceptoplatus, Pherolodon, things like that. But another one that was kind of described here was Barracudasauroides. So these particular species come from China. So these guys weren't very big. They're probably about a meter long or so, if that. So no more than 5 kilograms. So very, very small, especially being an early Jurassic animal. So this fossils of the genus were found in the Guangzhou province in China and is known as GMPKU P011033, which is a partial skeleton from the upper member of the Guanling Formation in the Jiangxi province in the central area. And the dates kind of date to the Pleistocene stage of the Astean stage, or quite in the early middle Jurassic. And it was named in 2010 as the type species, which is Barracudasaurides paranexus. So as I mentioned, Mixosaurids do have an interesting one. So Mixosaurus was the one that was kind of first described, and then they were kind of split into different species as well. In terms of their description, they do have like large skulls that were about 1/4 to 1/5 of their body. They were quite small. They got to a length of about 1 meter in the smaller species, but biggest they could get potentially was 2 meters, and there are some fragmentary remains that suggest they get up to 5 meters. But they seem to be very specialized, kind of almost eel-like ichthyosaurs, and they do have kind of those large eyes typical of ichthyosaurs and things like that. In terms of its ecology, we know that they were quite scaleless as well, and we know they had these collagen fibers that have like a fluke and tail, things like that. They probably ate fish. They weren't too different, probably in ecology. They're on that seafood diet. You know, they seafood, they will eat it. But yeah, really cute little guy that I don't really get to talk about. Very interesting because we have, you know, the biggest, we have Shartosaurus, and now we have Ichthyotitan, which I've covered a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, I believe. But it's really cool that now we know we have great varieties, some of the smallest and some of the biggest, to really impact the diversity. But anyway, this is Trippy's one, so Trippy always does a great job, you know, really, really awesome mod. So now we're going to let them swim off and do their thing. Now we're going to move on back onto the land. So now we've got a really cool animal. This was done by Gojira Chief. We have got Tetraphonius. Very interesting pattern with the swirls on it, but anyway, we'll wait till you stop moving. So this is Tetraphonius, which means a monstrous murderer. So these guys are a genus of Tyrannosauridae, a Tyrannosaurian theropod dinosaur that lived in the late Campanian age of the late Cretaceous period, between 77 and 76 million years ago, of what is now Utah, and contains a single specimen, which is Tetraphonius currii, which is known from incomplete skull and postcranial skeleton recovered from the Kaparowitz Formation, and was named after Philip J. Currie, who's quite a famous Tyrannosaur paleontologist, or paleontologist in general. So fossil these guys have mentioned been found in southern Utah from the Kaparowitz Formation, and that suggests it was between 76 to 74 million years ago during the Campanian age of the late Cretaceous. And several fossils of Tetraphonius have been found. There's a new specimen actually that was believed to be fossils of 4 to 5 individuals, but we do have a pretty good idea of what it looked like now. It was named after Thomas D. Carr. It was named by Thomas D. Carr, Thomas Carr, Thomas E. Williamson, Brooks Bibbett, and Ken Sandeman in 2011. And, you know, as we mentioned, it means murderous monster, and its generic name is honors Philip J. Currie. So the holotype itself has a fragmentary skull and parts of postcranial skeleton, and the fossils were originally assigned from 4 different individuals, but probably only of a single subadult animal. And the specimen itself was not fully grown, but it got about 6 meters or 20 feet long and about 667 kilograms, or just under 1,500 pounds. Though it was likely to be an underestimate, they built it up a bit, 2.5 tons and about 8 meters. And in 2021, there was some, based on some bones, it was about 6 meters and a ton, so that's kind of where it's gone. And longest specimen. The only known articulated specimen was about 7.6 meters, and the maximum length adult was about 8.7 meters. So 8-9 meters, so quite a big animal up there. So it was kind of definitely sizable, like same size league as things like Carnotaurus and Albertosaurus and animals like that. So in terms of its classification, it's assigned to the Tyrannosauridae, so it's related to Tyrannosaurus. They concluded it was both closely related to Tarbosaurus and Tyrannosaurus, but placed more basal within the family, and it was thought to be more derived potentially than Daspletosaurus. So it's 2 relatives, you know, you could say it's more derived than Daspletosaurus, but it is related to things like Baeris, Cerversa, and Lythronax, and things like that. In 2020 or so, it was with a description of Thanatoleptes is actually suggested to be in like a subclade with Diamantera and Lythronax, which is quite interesting. So it is believed to be kind of related to those guys. So that's quite interesting. In some research actually suggesting look into their social behavior. So there was a bone bed found in the Rainbows and Unicorn Quarry in 2021 that suggests that this genus may have been a social hunter. And the fossils consist of potentially 5 individuals ranging between 4 and 22 years of age, which suggests a mass mortality event, potentially caused by flooding or less likely by cyanobacterial toxis, fire or drought. So the fact that these animals were preserved dying together in a short time actually further strengthens the argument of tyrannosaurs in general being social, with bone beds of Tetraphonius, Albertosaurus, and Daspletosaurus being found together. That suggests they could all, have been, quite social animals. But we'll talk a little bit more where it came from. So the Parowitz Formation is quite an interesting formation. It is from the Campanian age of the late Cretaceous and was located in Laramidia on the eastern shore of the Western Interior Seaway, which split North America pretty much in half, with Laramidia on the kind of eastern side and western side being Appalachia. Eastern side it was something like that. But the plateau where dinosaurs lived on had large channels and wetlands, so quite a rich habitat, quite a wet habitat too, which is quite cool. It shared its habitat with all sorts of different other dinosaurs, such as Ornithomimus, Parasaurolophus, Dinosaurus, Nasutoceratops, Cosmoceratops, Utaceratops, and ankylosaurs such as, Ankylocephalus, and also some other types of ornithomimids, and all sorts of really interesting animals. Though other paleofauna it may have lived with was types of sharks and rays, crocodiles, including Deinosuchus, frogs, salamanders, turtle lizards, and a variety of early mammals. So it was quite a rich environment that it lived in, and quite cool too. So Tetraphonius, a really awesome dinosaur. So let your through run off and do your thing. We don't want to get you too close to our next animal. So the next one is quite a dubious species, and we'll get into that. It's quite hotly debated, because anything to do with T-Rex, as we know, is always quite hotly debated. So next up, we've got Nanotyrannus. I want to see you panicking. We'll have a look at you running, because I think that makes you look a little nicer. It's because you're in the way. Anyway, so let's have a look. Which one should we look at? You'll look at you. I kind of like the posture of you. So Nanotyrannus, which means dwarf tyrant, is actually quite a dubious taxon and quite hotly debated. It is one of the smaller tyrannosaurs, with Proceratosaurus and Guanlong being smaller, and one of the last tyrannosaurs to exist in the Cretaceous, living right up to about 66 million years ago. So the genus itself, as we'll get into, is only represented by a small skull, discovered by Charles W. Gilmore in 1941, and then it was described in 1946 as a specimen of Gorgosaurus. And then in 1988, it was redescribed by Phil Curry, Robert T. Barker, and Michael Williams, who was the late curator of the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, where it was described. Opinions can, I'll say it's kind of over-exaggerated how divided it is, but most part, the validity of Nanotyrannus lancensis suggests that it is not very valid. It's deemed to be a juvenile of Tyrannosaurus, or something very closely related to it. And the adult of the animal has left to be identified, or is it really just a juvenile Tyrannosaurus? In either case, an adult Nanotyrannus has been discovered, has to be discovered, or a juvenile Tyrannosaurus at the same size has to be Nanotyrannus, but morphologically distinct. So basically, the only way to disprove it would be to either find an adult Nanotyrannus, or to find a Tyrannosaurus of the same age as the specimens of Nanotyrannus and look morphologically different. But we don't have those, and it actually has a lot of evidence points to it actually still being a subadult. The fact that it's still debated is kind of a little bit maybe because of political, political things within the paleontology world rather than the evidence as well. But there is not much debate, but it's not really much of a debate, to be honest. However, there are two minor differences between the two species, including the high number of teeth, and the fission-fused bones of the holotype. And these features have led some paleontologists to keep the two genera separate, but there's also to, try to classify the situation. And there is a study that, studies that show that Nanotyrannus, especially things like Jane is the most famous one, and the dueling dino specimen, which is yet to be studied, they are definitely subadult individuals, and that kind of leads them to be, being Tyrannosaurus. So as mentioned, there is the skull of what was originally Gorgosaurus, and then there's the Jane specimen. So the holotype skull is, and then we mentioned Jane, so she's quite complete. So basically, they confirmed that several paleontologists, including Phil Curry, have confirmed that is a baby Tyrannosaurus or juvenile T-Rex, or a closely related species. And there is some, like Peter Larson, that actually suggests the separate genera. But we know that Jane herself was a subadult. It's just one of those things. It is debated, but most paleontologists agree. There are a few holdouts. As I mentioned, the debate's kind of a little bit more political. So there is things that they try to use to separate this genus. So things like having more teeth than Tyrannosaurus, also having features that are more basal, but often that's kind of in phylogenetic trees. If you put juvenile animals in, they'll come out more basal because they have features that are less developed, and they're juveniles, so they're not quite as developed. And some other minor things that they try to take it apart, and those that suggest that Nanotyrannus is a juvenile mentioned she was only half grown and died at 11. So she's definitely a juvenile, but a juvenile of what is kind of a little bit more argued, so it kind of makes sense. We have no other evidence of tyrannosaurs, any species of tyrannosaur other than T-Rex living in Hell Creek, and it's pretty well sampled. And, it's one of those things, it's kind of debated, but most research, the consensus pretty much now is that it's just a baby T-Rex. And, yeah, there's not really too much argument there. There's still some holdouts, but it's kind of gotten to the point where it's a lot more political rather than actually based on evidence, because pretty much all the evidence suggests, and we have pretty good growth curves and things like that, and looking at other tyrannosaurs, that a lot of them did follow this kind of growth, being skinny as babies until they reach their teenage years, and then they pack on a lot of weight and become these super big adults. And while it's more extreme in Tyrannosaurus, we do find things like Tarbosaurus have that kind of similar growth as well, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. We do have pretty good idea of it being a juvenile rather than just a Nanotyrannus, its own genus. But yeah, anyway, that was also done by Gojira Chief, another great little mod, so we can let you run off and do your thing. But last but definitely not least, we've got another animal from Hell Creek. I know we're going to have a love of this, guys. This is by Hasquak Tree. Did a really awesome job. We've got Anzu Willeri. We'll let them run off a little bit. So this is Anzu. It's a really nice little mod here. I'm definitely a big fan of this one. Look at that. Look at this beauty. So Anzu, which was named after a bird-like demon from ancient Mesopotamian religion. They're a monospecific genus of Calorithid dinosaurs, or a type of ornithomimid, from North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana that lived during the late Cretaceous, the Upper Maastrichtian, right at the end of the Age of Dinosaurs, which is from now known as the Hell Creek Formation. The type species and only species is Anzu willeri, with known from multiple species that preserve both skeletons that preserve cranial and postcranial elements, and then was described in 2014 by Matthew C. Lamana, Hans de Souza, Emma R. Schweitzer, and Tyler D. Arleisen. So, several large skeletons from these guys have been found in the Morrison Formation, and they were typically referred to as Quinotes, although recent studies suggest they were new species. In 1988, they found the first two partial skeletons of Anzu in a private South Dakota ranch that were disarticulated, and third specimen also came from North Dakota and his uncle's from Scott Hare's uncle's ranch. And they later confirmed that these partial skeletons were definitely part of the same species. And then these 4 fossils found in Hell Creek actually made a pretty complete skeleton, comprising about 80% of the skeleton. with these researchers kind of looking at it and say, this is actually a new species. And what is actually quite notable, this is the first example of a North American Oviraptorosaur. This is not as the first well-known example, or well-preserved example. For almost 100 years, the presence of ornithomimosaurs were known in North America, but not very, clear, because there was only a few bits of the skeleton. But we do have a pretty good, with the skeleton, we have a pretty good idea. And this creature's appearance, you can see like very big crest on their skulls, beak, no teeth, and very bird-like skeleton. And is nicknamed the Chicken from Hell, because, it looks very bird-like and from Hell Creek. It's the Chicken from Hell. And the species name, they originally wanted to give a Latin or Greek name version of Chicken from Hell, but they decided to not, but they found the nickname does not translate well in Greek or Latin, so they used Anzu, who was a mythological bird-like demon, and then Walarai honors, who's Wiley John Turtle, who was the grandson of one of the museum's donators, Lee B. Foster. So, as you can see, they're characterized by a toothless beak, a prominent crest, long and slender arms, relatively straight claws, long, powerful legs and slender toes, and a relatively short tail. They've got that tail feathers and arm feathers, everything, quite feathery. Anzu is about 3.5 to 3.75 meters, or 11-12 feet long, up to about 1.5 meters tall at the hips, about 5 feet at the hips, and about 200-300 kilograms of body mass, which probably makes it the largest North American ornithomimosaur, though it is related to things like Gigantoraptor, which was much bigger. In terms of its classification, it is placed within the Oviraptorosauridae and a member of the Carcinogeridae. It was actually suggested to be a possible sister species to Calognathus, but it is related to things like Gigantoraptor and things like that. And it had been expected that these guys would have been found in North America, as there's well-documented specimens in Asia, as the two continents were connected during the Cretaceous. But the discovery of Anzu actually indicates that North American Oviraptorosaurs are more closely related to each other than their counterparts in Asia. So in terms of its paleobiology, it was probably an omnivore or a herbivore, although its beak was not heavily constructed as other Oviraptorosaurs from Asia, so it may have been a little bit more, eating softer foods. One difference from its size as well, the Asian Oviraptoridae was smaller, and they also had thicker legs and different lower jaws. The fossils of Anzu itself was found in mudstones and what was believed to be part of an ancient floodplain, and this indicates the species likely had a lifestyle significantly different from its Asian counterparts, which lived in more arid ecosystems. These guys live in much more wet ecosystems. And its lifestyle, according to Stefan Brusetti from the University of Edinburgh, was suggested that it was a fast-running ecological generalist that didn't quite fit the usual molds of meat-eating or plant-eating dinosaurs, and its jaw morphology suggests that it could eat a variety of food items, including vegetation, small animals, and potentially eggs. And while a number of its features are similar to that to modern birds, it's not an avian dinosaur, and its line died out at the end of the Cretaceous, along with the rest of the non-avian dinosaurs, and it is related to birds. It's kind of that group of theropoda. But I wouldn't say it's probably para-aves, but it is a theropod and had feathers and things like that. It would have been potentially either its features that were more bird-like potentially would have been partly convergent evolution, but also because of its ancestry. Because when people think of a dinosaur, they think of T-Rex or Brontosaurus, they think of a dinosaur, and when they think of a bird, they think of something like a sparrow or chicken. But Anzu is kind of like a mosaic of both of these groups and give us a pretty good idea of how dinosaurs potentially became birds, along with many other species that we have a good idea of. And what's really interesting as well, you can see Anzu has quite a big crest. If you look on that head there, you can see that quite big crest. We'll actually scan a little bit. Look at that beautiful big crest. So the purpose of Anzu's large crest is unclear, though it is very large and made of paper-thin bone, so it would have been able to take much stress. And other Oviraptorosaurs would have had this crest, but Anzu kind of had the largest of them all, and it's believed to most likely function for display or showing off to members of your own species. And a great modern analogue is the cassowary, which has a similar crest that is thought to be used to attract mates, so it's possible they could have used it in this similar fashion. And the fossils of Anzu actually show the evidence of injuries, including a healed broken rib, an arthritic toe, that were probably a result of a tendon being ripped from the bone, and it's not known whether there was maybe from injuries from predators or potentially fighting each other for mates, or potentially just fighting each other in general. So we don't know how it got an injury, but it's cool that we can learn that stuff. So yeah, another great mod from Hasquak Tree, and a great place to end the episode. So we'll let them run off and do their thing, and I think we'll close off. So let's have a look there. Alright, so thank you for everyone making your mods, you know, like Weeds and Netraptor and Chocolate and Trip and Gojira Chief and Hasquak Tree. You've all done pretty wonderful jobs with these mods. So yeah, I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit that little bell icon to get notified below anything. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye bye.